Good morning. Welcome to the Senate Budget and Taxation Pension Subcommittee. I am Senator Michael Jackson from District 27, chairing the committee this morning. With us also on our subcommittee, Senator Hedelman, Senator Bailey, Senator Sowling. You'll see other folks trailing in. We're going to start with Senate Bill 972, Correctional Officers Retirement System Membership. It's by our chair, Kazone, and he has members of his staff come on up to present. And if you have a panel, come on, you can bring them up. The rules for the day, obviously, the presenters of the bill have all the time you need to explain the bill. Those that are testifying have 2 minutes. So please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lola Odioye, here on behalf of Senator Gazzoni to present Senate Bill 972, Correctional Officers Retirement System Membership. Currently, the security attendants, CNAs, and LPNs who provide both direct care, nursing, and security at Clifton T. Perkins Hospital Center are included in the Correctional Officers Retirement System, aka CORS, due to their court-ordered patient population. Comparable positions at the other Maryland Department of Health facilities with a court-ordered population have been excluded from CORS for decades. This legislation provides a parity between these employees by transferring 6 MDH job classifications comparable to Perkins positions that are already in CORS into the CORS system. As a result of Senate Bill 693 in 2020, the higher forensic pay rate that Perkins employees were receiving in security and direct care was extended to employees in similar positions in the other MDH forensic facilities, which fixed the longstanding pay disparity that existed between these employees. Sorry about that. Senate Bill 693 also required MDH to reclassify and hire these security attendants the same as Perkins. It took several years for the funding to reach the budget, and when MDH finally started hiring security attendants at the other forensic facilities, they promised a group of security attendants that they would be joining CORS, only to realize that later this required a change in statute because the law defining membership into CORS specifies that the security attendant must work at Perkins. In some instances, security attendants even transfer from Perkins to other MDH forensic facilities closer to where they live under the promise of maintaining their 20-year CORS retirement benefit, only to arrive and learn that they were in a 30-year retirement now, despite having the same title, duties, and patient population. The physical wear and tear that members can experience in these jobs is significant. The patients committed to these facilities from the courts are there because of a finding that they are a danger to themselves or others. Assaults on staff can occur frequently and be quite violent. The state is struggling to recruit and especially retain staff for this tough but vital work. To maintain quality career staff at these facilities, it is crucial to improve the retirement benefit now. Thank you, and I ask for a favorable report of Senate Bill 972.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the presenter? Hearing none. Next witness, proceed.
Sure. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Denise Gilmore, and I'm the Legislative Director for AFSCME Council 3. We represent the security and direct care staff at the state hospitals at the Maryland Department of Health. This bill really is different from other CORS membership bills that you've heard in recent years, in that these really are titles that truly should have been in the CORS, decades ago. The security attendants, as Lola did such a great job describing, got added to CORS in 1982. As the facilities have transitioned over the years, comparable titles at the other facilities with the same patient population, were left out of the benefit. The General Assembly helped with at least fixing the pay parity a few years ago, and now's our opportunity to finally fix that last remaining disparity between these employees, which is that retirement benefit. We've worked very closely with the State Retirement Agency on this. They have approved all the titles included in this bill for CORS. And I'm happy to hand it over to our members, but we would sincerely appreciate your support on SB 972. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Walter Moore. I'm a member of AFSCME, Local 539. I work as a security attendant for the Maryland Department of Health for 16 years. I am here to testify in support of SB 972. I started my career at Clifton T. Perkins Hospital in Jessup, Maryland. While working at Clifford T. Perkins as a security attendant, I was in the 20-year retirement system. Course. As a security attendant, we are responsible for providing security for patient population that is court ordered and that is admitted directly from a detention center. A few years ago, I heard about the opportunity to transfer to Springfield Hospital Center in Sykesville, Maryland, which is closer to my home and serves the same population as Perkins. I was told at that time that I would be able to remain in a 20-year retirement system since I was still going to be working as a security attendant and doing similar duties to what I was doing at Perkins. But after I arrived, I was told that I was no longer eligible for CORS and would now have to join a 30-year retirement system. The employees at Springfield Hospital that they already had. It makes no sense to me that I am doing the same work with the same patients for the same employer, the Department of Health, but I am at a facility 25 miles away and I have a different retirement benefit now. As direct care staff and security staff who work in the same population, we should all have the same benefits. It is long overdue to fix this disparity. Please provide your favorable vote for SB 972. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your service. Any questions for the panel? Let me say this before you step down. You know, the beauty of this subcommittee, as well as the 90-day legislative session for citizen legislators is set up across this country in different formats, but it's for us to, you know, kind of assess the laws that are on the books and if they are applicable to tomorrow. And if they're not, our job is to work to rectify that. So thank you all for bringing this. I'm very familiar with what you do and the service you provide. You haven't been classified as they are with Patuxent. And so we're looking forward to working on this. Thank you all for coming down.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on 972. Next up, we'll have Senate Bill 700. Senator Carrozza, and feel free to bring up your panel with you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Morning.
For the record, Senator Mary Beth Carrozza, representing District 38, Maryland's Coast, Somerset, Wycomico, and Worcester counties. And I do want to thank this particular subcommittee for their thoughtful approach and for allowing us to present Senate Bill 700. This is enabling legislation that would provide local jurisdictions with the option to allow 911 specialists to qualify for LEOPS, the Law Enforcement Officers Pension System. The need for this bill was brought to my attention by both local law enforcement and 911 specialists as a way to retain and recruit these valuable public safety employees. As Fruitland Police Chief Cray Plunkard and other law enforcement leadership have shared with me over the years, our 911 dispatchers and operators endure many of the same stresses as our officers, and they often are the first emergency contact for the public during critical incidences and emergencies. Our 911 specialists are an absolute lifeline for police, fire, and EMS personnel and the general public. As this committee knows, eligibility for LEOPS covers many first responders, including natural resource police officers, members of the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services Intelligence and Investigative Division, paramedics, and firefighters. Currently, our 911 specialists are not eligible for LEOPS retirement, despite being the first emergency contact for the public in most life and death emergencies. Our 911 personnel are essential to our first responders, and I believe we should give local jurisdictions the option to include 911 specialists in LEOPS. Over the past 2 years since I first introduced this bill, I have been in communication with law enforcement officials, 911 specialists, and state retirement and pensions retirement personnel to find a solution to this growing concern among our first responders that their first responders, our 911 specialists, are not able to receive the same LEOPS benefits that many of them receive. The bill as amended before you is mirrored after Senate Bill 368 of 2023, which was enabling legislation to allow local jurisdictions to offer LEOPS to emergency medical technicians. As you can see from the fiscal note, this bill only applies to local governments that elect to participate in LEOPS and would not impact state level finances. Senate Bill 368, sponsored by by Chair Jackson and co-sponsored by many of you, unanimously passed the Senate and the House and was signed into law by Governor Moore on April 24th, 2023. We need to do the same for our 911 specialists. Mr. Chair, I publicly want to thank you. The past couple of years, we've had some very candid discussions on how we can address the challenges of recruitment and retention of our 911 specialists. We have talked from a legislative vehicle to do that, to perhaps what we've done with correctional officers in the past, in the short term, some recruitment and retention bonuses one time to address the immediate need. I also have another bill that would establish a 911 specialist work group, similar to the law enforcement and fire EMS, where they come up with the longer term solutions for the recruitment and retention. I think we're here today, this is year 3, to urge the subcommittee to look at the legislation as proposed, since we were able to do that for emergency medical technicians last year, and to look at both the short term and the long term. I do want to point out that this bill, this effort to support our 911 specialists, is supported not only by our MACO, our county organizations, but if you look at the support from the Fire EMS Coalition, that includes those voting organizations are the Maryland Fire Chiefs Association, the Maryland State Firemen's Association, the State Fire Marshal, Maryland Fire Rescue Institute, Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services System, the Metro Fire Chiefs Association, and the Professional Firefighters of Maryland, as well as other local public safety organizations. So in deference to your leadership and to the commitment of this subcommittee, I urge a favorable report for Senate Bill 700. And if it would be okay, if I could have my witnesses
In
heard.
whichever
before
order
questions.
you like, before you say that, before we do that. We will continue to work on resolutions as necessary. Because they are our first responders, truly. So however.
So we have a
whichever order
panel
you like.
today. I wanted to first start with Chief Plunkett, who originally brought the LEOPS bill for 911 specialists to us a couple years ago, as well as we have Holly Gusky, who is the 28-year Talbot County 911 supervisor, as well as Tanner Jones is here as part of with Chief Plunkett as the police communications supervisor from Fruitland. And we also have Chief Bob Phillips testifying in support of the bill. So if I could start with the chief, if that would be okay.
That is fine. Morning, Chief.
Good morning, Senator Jackson, committee members. I want to express my sincere support for Senate Bill 700. Our communication personnel, our 911 dispatchers, provide an absolute invaluable service to our police, fire, and EMS personnel, as well as our communities. Our 911 dispatcher and communication specialists save lives on a regular basis and rarely are recognized for doing so. They provide life-saving guidance with CPR instructions, calming suicide persons, and even convincing armed suspects to disarm prior to our police arrival. They simultaneously answer 911 calls, determine the nature and classification for the incident, dispatch the calls for service, while remaining focused on law enforcement officers' response and their safety. Our dispatchers are a lifeline to the public and to our first responders. Having been in law enforcement over 35 years, sir, I can recall countless times that the radio dispatcher has significantly reduce the chances of an officer being killed or injured in the line of duty. The common saying within law enforcement is our dispatchers will always have our six. One of the most overlooked topics in first responder community is the contributions of our dispatchers. They are seldom paid for what they're worth. They are generally not eligible from comparable retirement. It needs to be acknowledged that our dispatchers experience many of the same stressors that we as law enforcement officers experience. They too experience the rapid pulse, increased blood pressure, anxiety, sleep disruption caused by rotating shifts and lost family time during the holidays. When people's lives are on the line or officer fails to answer their radio, they're in a life-threatening situation. Our dispatchers feel that same exact response as those personnel that are on the scene. Senate Bill 700 goes a long way to recognize their contributions of our dispatchers, which will create an eligible career path with a sustainable retirement rather than a job. For an example, under the current retirement system, PCS Jones, who's seated at the end of the table, started his career at 18 years old, will not be able to retire until he works a solid 42 years. Then he'll receive the eligible retirement. This bill models the same bill unanimously passed into law to allow Salisbury Fire Department to participate in LEOPS, Senate Bill 504 of 2004, and the unanimously passed bill just last year to allow emergency technicians to participate in LEOPS, Senate Bill 368. The passage of this bill will enhance the ability to recruit and retain qualified members of our law enforcement community. The increased quality and longevity of our dispatchers will greatly impact the quality of citizens to the state of Maryland. I beg of you, sir, and this committee, please support Senate Bill 700, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Chief. Thank you for traveling over this morning, by the way.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. My name is Holly Gusky. I'm the 911 Communications Chief for Talbot County. I'm here today for your consideration for Senate Bill 700, authorizing 911 specialists become members of the law enforcement officers pension system. 911 communication specialists work in high stress environments. They often receive traumatic 911 calls, must make critical life-saving decisions, have the ability to remain calm under pressure, and work long and irregular shifts. They experience heavy workloads and must juggle multiple calls at once, which can be mentally and emotionally taxing. Despite all these challenges, 911 specialists play a vital role as the first responder. Due to the high stress nature of the job, the burnout rate among 911 specialists is at a high level. Studies have shown that burnout rates among 911 specialists are higher than those in many professions. According to NINA, 60% of 911 professionals reported symptoms of burnout. 911 specialists often feel unsupported and undervalued. Recruiting 911 specialists have become increasingly difficult across the state. Currently, all new 911 specialists are required to obtain 1,100 hours of on-the-job training. Compared to other emergency response professions such as law enforcement, EMS, and firefighters, the role of 911 dispatcher is lesser known to the general public. This, along with the stressors of the job, can result in fewer individuals considering dispatching as a career. The stress and demands of the job often lead to high turnover rates. This makes it even more difficult on recruitment efforts. Retaining a dedicated and loyal 911 communications specialist is key to any organization. They have valuable knowledge that can only be gained through years of experience of on-the-job training. Maryland LEOPS helps attract qualified individuals and encourages an individual to stay in the profession. Overall, Maryland LEOPS can be an important tool to support employee well-being and ensure the long-term needs of both the organization and the 911 communication specialist. These are just a few of the reasons I ask you to vote yes to Senate Bill 700. Thank you for your time and listening about our profession.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your service. Chief Phillips.
Good morning, Chair Jackson and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Robert Phillips. I am the legislative chair for the Maryland State Firefighters Association. We represent 25,000 volunteer firefighters and EMS people across the state. You've heard all of this. Most of it I've had here to talk about, so I'll change a little bit. You've heard about burnout. My former wife, She was a dispatcher for Dorchester County for 17 years. She went from a vivacious, every day got to be the life of the party person to someone who would not leave their house due to her job. She had PTSD. We don't normally talk about PTSD, especially with dispatchers, and we should. That's the reality of it. They face everything we do as first responders. I'm a 45-year firefighter, volunteer the whole time. I was lucky. I retired out as a chief. I finished my time. But I speak now for the dispatchers. The chief from Fruitland spoke about how they relied on their dispatchers. When you're out there in the middle of the night by yourself, the only thing you have is your radio. And they are the other end of the radio. They feel everything we do. I get very emotional over this. They feel everything we do. The only difference is the dispatchers do not get closure. When the cavalry shows up and takes over, we finish the job. We see what's taking place, good, bad, and indifferent. The worst thing in the world has ended. We've started making it better. And they're still in the dispatch center taking the next call. They need the respect that this bill will give them. They deserve it. Please vote favorable.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate your service. And is that it for your testimony?
Yes, it is.
All right, so let me just wrap up by saying this again. We appreciate your service. We appreciate you bringing this piece of legislation here and continuing to keep the information in front of us and keep the cause in front of us. That's vital. That's important. As I have served since the late 80s in public safety, and I'm in Homeland Security in Prince George's County now. We have the 911 Center of Public Safety Communications. Charlene Flaherty is our deputy director over there. So we certainly understand where we are, and we thank you for continuing the fight, bringing this to us, and we'll be deliberating shortly on this. Questions or comments, Senator Bailey?
Thank you very much, and thank you for your panel. I had the privilege to be in charge of the communications center for the Natural Resource Police. And sir, what you say is exactly right? That everybody experiences it. You know, having been a police officer on the road, on the water, different places, you're in a 911 thing, you're dealing with saving someone's life. You have closure at the end. The most interesting thing was I'd be there in the middle of the night. We'd have an emergency ongoing. I'd pick up the phone, talk to the officers. I'd seen it. I knew what was happening out there. All of a sudden, they just, the phone calls were over, the incident, and then their blood pressure had nowhere to go, right? They definitely had something that was never addressed. I appreciate, Senator, you bringing the bill, and we'll work very diligently on this.
All right. And lastly, before we bring up, so we have an unfavorable. Before we do that, let me say this: a couple of you all talked about, starting with the chief, about the mental health aspect of this, behavioral health aspect. It took us a long time in law enforcement and firefighting to and corrections to realize that the folks performing the services needed services as well. We don't ask for it, we need it, and it's up to us to recognize that. And so that is something that's ongoing within the 911 community, that we are beginning to recognize that through the Next Generation 911 work group task force that I served on, and we are certainly looking at that as well. So thank you all for coming down today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank
All
you,
right,
members.
cool. Be safe, stay safe. Next up, we have Ms. Ann Gothrop for an unfavorable. Ms. Gothrop. When you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Let me start by saying I want to thank Senator Carrozza, because she's worked very closely with our agency on this issue. And you all need to know we are very sympathetic to this. And I don't say that lightly. What these individuals do in their job is quite something. Unfortunately, federal law does not include 911 specialists in the definition of qualified public safety officers. Because of that, we cannot admit them into our law enforcement officers plan. That being said, and I also don't say this lightly or flippantly. If the federal law were to change, if that definition were to change to include 911 specialists, then I'm not here at all. You don't hear from me. And this can happen. In the last year or two, I can't remember if it was 1 year or 2 years ago, the definition was changed. Prior to this, prior to the change within the last couple of years, the law referenced only federal correctional officers. And so you've all seen these bills come in to move correctional officers, groups of people from the employee system into the correctional officer system. And some of them were correctional officers. And we were concerned that the law only says federal correctional officers. If we get dinged on this, we're hoping they'll extrapolate it to mean local also. Within the last couple of years, that definition was changed to include local correctional officers. So this is not an insurmountable task. Until that happens, though, I'm going to be in here opposing this legislation because to admit them jeopardizes our tax qualified status.
All right. Any questions or comments, Ms. Gothard? Senator Solomon.
There we go. Well, thank you for coming. I think it's really important that if it's a possibility that we can work together, maybe get some of our federal partners to see if we can get some type of legislation, or if they have a legislation that we can amend that legislation to have an opportunity so you can come back with a smile, which I believe in your face, that we can work with our other
Yes,
partners.
I would love that.
Second, I would love to do that. So if there's something that we can do, I'm sure our chairman and others would love to have an
Absolutely.
opportunity to work with our federal partners and see if we can get something done. So I'd love to work with you if we can get that.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thank you
we
very much.
welcome that.
Senator Hellman.
Ask if there was a possibility that we could, as a committee, write to our federal legislators asking them.
Yeah, you can best believe that was going to come up.
Yeah.
In this committee,
Thanks,
so
Ed.
absolutely. All right. I know who all your representatives are, by the way. All right, thank you very much. I have no further question or comment. Don't go anywhere. So next bill, that concludes the hearing for Senate Bill 700. Next up will be Senate Bill 880, State Retirement and Pension System, Average Final Compensation Adjustments. Ms. Gothard, you're on.
So this is not one of our bills. We did
Well, I
bring
will-
this to
I
the
will-
joint committee.
I will go.
Okay,
All right, but don't go anywhere.
all right.
All right, so members of the committee, fellow committee members, Senate Bill 880 makes a technical change with respect to calculation of the average final compensation for a member of the employee's pension system or teacher's pension system. Legislation would simply make it so that a salary increase would not be considered extraordinary if it is made either to address inequities in compensation among employees in the same position classification or to increase compensation for the position classification to be more consistent with market compensation for the position. So oftentimes we may see such an adjustment. That way, we currently calculate the way that we currently calculate the average final compensation and alternate contributory pension selection does not allow for extraordinary salary increases that occur in the last 3 years of employment, and those in the reform contributory pension benefit. Those hired after July 1, 2011 do not allow for extraordinary salary increases in the last 5 years of employment. So legislation simply corrects that inequity. And the reason I have Ms. Gothard up front is to be able to answer any questions or comments that the members may have. And if there are any further comments, Ms. Gothard, that maybe further clarification if it's not clear enough.
No, you did a great
good?
job explaining what the bill does.
All right, thank you all very much. Any questions or comments? All right, that closes that hearing on Senate Bill 880. Senate Bill 706, Law Enforcement Officers Pension System Reemployment as Sheriffs. Am I starting? You starting?
Whatever you want to do. I'm here.
Right. Let me see here. Bear with me 1 second. All right, morning, colleagues. Senate Bill 706, Senator Michael Jackson, District 27, On behalf of Senate Bill 706 requires the Board of Trustees for the State Retirement and Pension System to temporarily suspend the retirement benefit for a retiree receiving LEOPS or law enforcement officers pension system benefits if the retiree is elected sheriff within 5 years after retirement. We will talk about that number in a second. The suspension would subsequently last the duration of the individual's tenure as sheriff. Upon the accumulation of the individual's tenure as sheriff, the board would then reinstate their allowance with accumulated cost of living adjustments for the date from the date that the allowance was temporarily suspended. This is a pretty straightforward piece of legislation in that regard, but I do want to mention that survivor benefits would be adhered to should an uncertain or unfortunate incident occur. The family still will be taken care of, and that this piece of legislation will be prospective. So, Ms. Gothard, if you would like to speak before I proffer a change in the year's suspension, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So a little background on this. When a member retires from any of the several systems, they're required to separate from service entirely from all employment with a participating employer before they can begin receiving benefits. Also, as a member prepares for retirement, they cannot have a plan already in place to come back to work following their retirement. Specifically, the member is informed during this process that no offers of reemployment can even be discussed between a member and a participating employer of the plan prior to retirement. These reemployment restrictions, they come from rulings, IRS rulings and provisions within the Internal Revenue Code. And while the IRS has not specifically defined what constitutes a bona fide separation from service, in private letter rulings, the IRS has stated that employees who retire in order to qualify for a benefit with the explicit understanding between the employee and the employer that they are not actually separating from service with the employer are not legitimately retired. The IRS went on to say that because these employees would not actually separate from service and cease performing services for the employer when they retired, these retirements would not constitute a legitimate basis to allow participants to qualify for retirement benefits. The IRS concluded that such retirements would violate provisions of the Internal Revenue Code and result in disqualification of the plan. Okay, so with that background laid out, in the past year, we've learned of sheriffs who are, while they are running for re-election and they are running unopposed, they retire from service. And then within 45 days of retiring, after 45 days of retiring, they are sworn in back into their position as sheriff. So in light of the position that the IRS has taken in the private letter rulings that I've just read to you, we're concerned that they could conclude that these individuals had not legitimately retired and that this could jeopardize our tax qualified status. Now, I know I talk a lot about this. I just talked about it with the 911 officers. I come in all the time and I say, oh, this is going to jeopardize our tax qualified status. I think it would be helpful if I just took a few minutes to explain what that means and what the impact could be to the plan and to our members if we lose that status. So maintaining qualified status is critical to receiving significant federal tax benefits for plan members and the state. When a plan is disqualified, active members are required to include employee contributions and employer contributions in their gross income. The member contribution rate in LEOPS right now is 7% of their salary. The employer contribution rate in LEOPS projected for fiscal 25, it's going to be 46.76% of their salary. A disqualified plan loses its tax exempt status and is required to pay taxes on its earning. Last year, the system earned $537 million. We'd have to pay taxes on that. Members would no longer have the ability to roll over eligible distributions. Employers and members would be required to pay employment taxes on employer contributions. These are just a few of the consequences that could happen to the state and to the plan and to our members if we lose our qualified status. Because of this, we're hoping we have your support on 706 with a couple of amendments that the chairman alluded to. The first is we're asking that this bill be prospective so that it would not impact anyone who was retired on or before the effective date of this bill. Maryland is a contractual state when it comes to pension benefits. So we believe that for individuals who have already retired, This is changing the rules of the game after they've retired. We would face possibly impairment of contract issues. So we just want to make sure this only applies to anyone who retires after the effective date of the bill. And the second amendment, we think that perhaps in the bill that our opening offer of 5 years might have been a bit extreme. So we would suggest that the committee consider reducing that to 1 year. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gothrop, for that explanation. And we appreciate us being able to work on some amendments to kind of make things make sense to us. And again, one of the charges for this committee is to make sure that we preserve our pension systems for everyone. So, Senator Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just have a couple quick questions, just so I understand this. Thought I pretty much understood the 45-day rule. So this legislation only involves people that would be running for sheriff?
That's right.
Okay. And if they were running for sheriff, they would have just had to, under the plan that we're worried about, they would have just had to retire 45 days before they were sworn in.
Yes.
So it wouldn't matter to them if let's say they wouldn't have to announce that their retirement, they could run as an employee. They could be campaigning, doing everything until we got to the election. And then they'd have to back it up 45 days from when they were sworn in, or would it be 45 days from the day they were elected?
From the day they are sworn in, because that's when they would be reemployed.
Okay.
So in this case, I think some of the sheriffs retired November 1st. Most local jurisdictions swear in the middle of December. So they retired a few days before the election. And yes, they were running unopposed, but you never know how an election is going to end up. So let's assume there was a massive write-in campaign and that person lost. This is not an issue, because then that person is not going to be reemployed in the middle of December, again, because they won't be sworn in.
And Senator Bailey, also it's also the matter of folks running before they retired. And, you know, there's a provision there. There are some folks who, Ms. Gothrop, if you would, I think we talked about this on the phone the other day, the number of, so we're talking LEOP system, and the number of agencies or counties that it affects, that it impacts. And so obviously this piece of legislation is brought to us because the system got flagged, which means they bring it to us to kind of to mesh it out. I will say have been joined by Senator Elsis as well.
So that my only question was, and I greatly appreciate the amendment to move it from 5 years to 1 year, but having come from a state agency where you know, and we want people that are current law enforcement officers. We don't want them sitting on the sidelines for a bunch of years before they run to be sheriff.
Agreed.
Right? We want them as soon as possible. So, but you know, we want that. You know, everything is based on current knowledge, right? What's happening in the court system, what's happening with case law, you know. So my thing is, if you're amenable to go to 1 year, I just would ask you to maybe think about 6 months or 3 months, whatever protects our service, but allows us to get these men and women to give them the opportunity to move in.
So Senator Bailey, I'll tell you, I was reading an article last night in Florida that happened in Florida, and this was a tax attorney down there weighing in. There were a number of individuals. These weren't law enforcement officers. They were county employees. They retired, came right back to work. The IRS, I don't know what happened to the plan, but these individuals, there were 18 of them. Fines by the IRS ranged between $2,000 and $70,000 for each person. The tax attorney weighing in on this said they could sit out a year, 2 years. It doesn't matter really the length of time. What matters is the intent at the end of that time. If you're already planning on coming back. So when you say 3 months, 6 months, I mean, 45 days, if someone retired and within 45 days, the something happened and they were called back to be sheriff for whatever reason, then there was no intent when they originally retired that they were going to continue to be sheriff 45 days from now. Something unexpected happened. There are private letter rulings where the IRS says that's fine. That's fine. It's
Okay.
the intent that when you leave, you're coming back.
I completely understand. I understand that this was a result of one issue down our way. So I understand where you are now. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bailey. Anyone else? All right, thank you, Ms. Gothard. We will be, that will be the end of, that concludes the end of Senate Bill 706. Also concludes, no, it does not. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. On the favorable side. So we have, Sheriff Albert. Come on up. Mr. Eric Roby. Deputy Roby, come on up. I apologize, gentlemen. Senator Bailey threw me off. Blame him. All right, good morning, gentlemen. For those who are joining the panel, we don't have you signed up, but we will make allowances for it. So 2 minutes, please. Proceed as you wish.
Okay, I'll go first, Chairman. We appreciate you having it. And that's not the first time Senator Bailey's tried. He does that.
He does.
Tries to throw you off a little bit. So after Ann's explanation, I understand it better. Obviously I had a prepared statement without the amendments. With the amendments, I still have some concerns with it, but I do understand the intent of the bill now.
Okay.
I retired from the state law. I was with Natural Resource Police, worked with Senator Bailey for a few years. And we, I retired in 2016.
Sheriff, if you could, for the record, just give us your name.
Oh, yes. Sheriff Brian Albert, Washington County. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
And,
So Senator Bailey again threw you off as well.
Exactly. So, that's our concern moving forward with getting qualified people that want to step up and run for sheriff and, have to retire within a year. I made the decision in 2016 to run in 2018. So I went into the drop program, which is a little bit different with LEOPS. I think Natural Resource Police was the only agency that has the drop eligible in LEOPS. So it was a little different, but I understand the bill now, but I do have some concerns still.
All right, cool. So before we move on, Sheriff, and for the rest of the panel and those who are listening at home, we are okay with receiving your concerns. That helps us when we deliberate to make decisions. So please feel free to talk to anyone with any association, chiefs and sheriffs and whomever. So cool.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Chair Jackson. Eric Roby, Director of Legislative Affairs, Hartford County Sheriff's Office. We are here after the amendments, I'll say friendly, unfavorable, if that's a new position we can take in Annapolis. We certainly appreciate with the sheriffs that are sitting to my right and my left. I know a number of them would have been greatly impacted by the language prior to the amendments. The biggest concern, one of the biggest concerns for us was the 5 years. As many of you know, because you've been down here passing these laws that are changing the law enforcement profession in Maryland, a lot changed from 5 years ago. 5 years ago, if you were a sheriff or a chief in the state of Maryland, you would be operating on disciplinary procedures under the LEOBR process. Now we've got police accountability boards, we've got charging committees, and we've got trial boards with civilians, with a combination of civilians and law enforcement members. So a lot changes in 5 years. We appreciate the committee. We appreciate you, Chairman, for moving it back to 1 year because, as you know, it's been a challenge to hire and retain qualified law enforcement professionals throughout the state of Maryland. It's also a challenge for us, looking at the profession going forward for these individuals that are qualified deputies or police officers in the state of Maryland to move into a position as sheriff. And when you're looking at that position as sheriff, I know the pension system came up and we talked about that intent to go back to an agency, that intent to be rehired by the agency, and that 45-day break. The challenge that I see here is that this man or woman that wants to run for the office of sheriff, yes, it's their intent to go back to that agency, but just like each one of you, it was your intent to be a state senator in the state of Maryland. It was the voters who actually made that decision to put you in office and bring you back or bring you in to the Senate of Maryland. So it's the voters of the county that actually make that decision, whether that individual, that law enforcement officer, can come back as sheriff of that county. So we still stand opposed to the legislation as stated, but we certainly appreciate the amendments, and we think it definitely takes a step in the right direction to where we want to get to. So thank you, Chairman.
Always, I appreciate your comments, and we appreciate the modified opposition to the bill. Sheriff, whichever,
Senator
See you
Jackson and
next.
committee, thank you all for your time, and thank you all very much for considering the amendments to this. Every situation for everyone's retirement is very different. I had full intent of continuing as sheriff into my 5th term. I'm trying not to get emotional here, but in July of 2022, I had gone to the hospital and was told I possibly had a stroke. So in July of 2022, my wife was home with a 2-month-old breastfeeding. I remember the picture vividly with our other 4-year-old on her lap, crying as to why dad's in the hospital. Went to Anne Arundel Hospital. I was on the neurology unit there, and I was told that, if you had a brain bleed or if you had a stroke, it was unpredictable as to what your future may be. Thank goodness I had a good outcome at the end of all this at Anne Arundel. But the one thing I can tell you is when you're laying there in a hospital bed and you have no idea what your future is going to bring for my wife and my 2 young children, being an old guy here with 2 young kids. I'll tell you that I had called our county and I was told that if something happened to me, that my wife would be put on 90 days of COBRA if I was to pass. And I would not have health benefits for the 2-month-old nor the 4-year-old after that 90-day period. Our county has since changed that. They did emergency legislation. I had July, August, September, and October to work with our county, and they said it was in progress and they were going to make the changes. It came down to the end of October where I just couldn't wait any longer. I had to make a decision that was in the best interest of my family, and that was to walk out of a career that I love so much. And I'm very proud of serving every single citizen in Queen Anne's County and this great state. But I had to make a decision. The election wasn't held yet. Somebody could have won possibly, I guess, the statements that were made earlier. But I had a family to look out for. Thankfully, everything worked out. Our county, after I had left, held a hearing, and the county commissioners unanimously agreed to provide the county employees benefits if someone should die while they were before they were retired. Sadly, there was a county employee that tried to tough it out. He did 34 years and 9 months, I believe, passed, and his wife got the 90 days of COBRA. The county did fix that problem, and I really applaud and give thanks to the county commissioners and our HR in Queen Anne's County. But everyone's situation is different, and I just truly thank all of you for just listening to and making amendments to this, because my intent was to continue into the 5th term. But I had a life-altering event that I had to address first with my family. So thank you, committee. Thank you, Senator.
Absolutely, Sheriff. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm sorry, Sheriff, and now, say your name and age.
I'm sorry. Sheriff Gary Hoffman, Queen Anne's County.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Sheriff Robertson?
Yes, Sheriff Robertson, Allegheny County, Senator Jackson committee, thank you. I echo my colleagues' responses. I appreciate the amendments. I do echo the same concern, though, about in this day and age. I've been in law enforcement now for 45 years. I've seen a lot of changes in that length of time. And most recently, the problem of obtaining police officers in today's society is getting harder and harder. And my only concern is I felt that this piece of legislation was now making it a lot harder for us to have good individuals as in the office of the sheriff. So that's still my main concern. Is I think it's going to limit the number of people that may be able to run for this particular office. But I do appreciate the recommendations and the amendments. So I do want to thank each and every one of you for that.
All right,
Thanks
thank you.
again.
Thank you all for traveling down. And again, our job is to make sure we maintain a system for the masses. And that's what we're doing here. But let's stay in touch, and great to see you all. That concludes
Thank you very much.
the hearing. Thank you. Travel safe, John. All right, we're gonna move to bill discussions and voting. Philip? All right, we're gonna move into bill discussions and voting. Turn it over to Philip.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First bill for discussion is Senate Bill 320. This was a joint committee on pensions bill as introduced. This was doing the technical fix to the legislation last year for the drop extension, fixing the issue where the uncodified language is referenced, not extending past age 60. That should have only applied to state police. So in the bill last year, it applied to state police and LEOPS. This is a technical fix to correct that. It's actually already been implemented in that manner by the agency. They just wanted the law to match what they did. There is, you should have a reprint. There was an additional amendment offered by the system. This would be another technical fix they uncovered. So last year, there was legislation, it was either last year or the year before, there was legislation with the investment division and incentive compensation. The law has requirements that any incentive compensation earned is paid out over multiple years. And if an employee leaves employment with the division, they leave any unpaid compensation on the table. Legislation was previously passed to allow an employee who's retiring within 30 days of leaving, so basically retiring directly from the division, to receive any unpaid compensation. The CIO's position was not included in that because it's in a different statute. So this just aligns the practice for all of the investment division employees, including the CIO.
All right, any questions? Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Philip.
Senate Bill 322, this would establish mandatory enrollment in the state employees, teachers and employees supplemental retirement plans for any employees hired on or after January 1, 2025. Employees would have 90 days to opt out of the automatic enrollment with after beginning state service.
Members, you know, if you recall this piece of legislation, we had the treasurer and the system come forward. It's a supplemental opportunity for members of the system. Any discussion, comments, motion? Can we get a second and then we discuss? Thank you, Senator Alford.
Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I completely support the intent, but I think, was it AFSCME that was here with concerns? Have those been mitigated at all?
Those concerns, yes, the system has responded to all four of Mr. Moran's concerns.
Okay.
And one of the concerns was membership on the board. That's been, you know, we had spoken about that earlier. The other was the having to be in the system, but the option, look, I think the option, the ability for them to opt out of the system is reasonable. And then there were a couple of other concerns, and I'll make sure you have the response.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just want to make sure
Yes,
those were heard.
absolutely.
Thank you.
They were addressed. So.
Thank you for your work on it.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Senate Bill 366.
Senate Bill 366. This is another bill dealing with reemployment of retirees in the teachers' pension system. This was the issue where there was effectively a MABE employee who was a reemployed retiree, but the arrangement was that they were an employee of one of the participating employers. So they were not subject to, they were subject to a reemployment offset, even though for all effective purposes, the funding stream was not state money. There's other examples in the reemployment offsets for exemptions for when the source of the funds is not state funds. So the bill if introduced would address the issue that was brought to your attention. The system had proposed some additional amendments to they've been working with the local jurisdictions and MABE to kind of sort this out for future. So they were asking for a sunset on bill provisions as introduced. And then they were also asking, there was another provision in law that is not really being used and is causing some undue administrative burdens to review and implement. And there was a few years ago, legislature had passed an additional exemption for somebody who was a reemployed retiree where the source was grant funds. And it's something that's not really being happened. So the system has also asked for an amendment to sunset that provision. I don't have those before you. When we were looking at them, it's actually one of those issues where it's like highly technical to get the amendments ready. But if you're comfortable with the concept, I can have those ready for full committee if the subcommittee refers it.
Any question on the concept? Did Philip explain it well enough? I think I understand it. I think I grasp it. Anyone else? We have a motion on the, so we're talking about 2 amendments, correct?
2 amendments, yeah, sunset the
For this-
existing and then add in the other piece.
Right, can we get a motion on the sunset provision, the amendment? Can I get a second? Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you. Second, provision, Bill, if you want to sum it. The amendment, second amendment.
Oh, the other amendment was repealing the grant funding exemption, since it's not something that's really being used and it's causing administrative difficulties.
All right, motion for that. Second. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion for the bill as amended. All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. We are at Senate Bill 368.
Senate Bill 368, this would apply the military service credit eligibility criteria to individuals with service in the public health service, National Oceanic and Atmospheric, or the Coast and Geodetic Survey. Current law has very defined windows of service that are applicable. The bill would repeal those and basically allow any prior service at any time to be eligible under the existing criteria for claiming military service.
All right.
You kind of like define that a little bit more.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, so current law, for those affected units, so these are federal, Public Health Service, National Oceanic and Atmospheric, and Coast and Geodetic Survey. Current law only allows for claiming service that occurred December 7, 1941 to December 31, 1946. June 25th, 1950 to January 1, 1955, and December 22, 1961 to May 7, 1975. So I think it's World War II, Korean War, and
Vietnam.
But there are other, the testimony was that individuals in those services may get deployed in other time periods. And the other military service, whenever it happens.
Yeah, we've taken that up in the Veterans Caucus a number of times, so I think we're good. Yeah. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you all. Senate Bill 489.
Senate Bill 489. This is another joint committee on pensions bill. As introduced, this was clarifying provisions regarding the personal statement of benefits. It's information the system is supposed to provide retirees every year. With modern advancements, the new system web portal, the system is moving away from sending out the letters in paper form and trying to get people to get logging into that online portal, which will provide more up-to-date benefits. So when the personal statements of benefits go out, they're already immediately a little bit outdated. So if a member wants the best up-to-date information, they'll get it through the portal. There were some technical and clarifying amendments. You should have a reprint at your desk. The system asked. This would just specify providing certain information on the State Retirement Agency's website. And then if you see on page 2 of the reprint, it's kind of moving the existing information into a new subsection that would require that information to be available on the secure access participant portal. These amendments would be consistent with the House cross file.
Senator Bailey.
Go real quick question about that. For retirees that are, I use my dad for an example. He's 87 years old. He doesn't really have access to a computer. How would he get his benefits statement?
Well, this, sorry to clarify this, and Ann might be able to clarify. I believe this is mostly for active members.
Just active employees?
Yeah, so every
Okay.
year, like an active member every year gets the information about the benefit, like, you know,
Yep.
if you retire at this age or if you retire with this type of benefit, this is what, you know, the payments will be. Somebody who's already retired, they're already retired, so they're just getting their check.
Thank you.
So we're speaking of Senate Bill 489, the personal statement of benefits. Just, we understand.
Senator Bailey's question was about elderly individuals who, you know, are already retired and the personal statement of benefits. And I was noting that this is more an issue for the active members or people who aren't retired yet.
The personal statement of benefits, but, you know, with regard to ISFPS, we recognize that we have a population out there that doesn't have a computer, doesn't have a smartphone. Anyone can call us anytime.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Senate Bill 490.
Senate Bill 490, this is another joint committee on pensions bill. This bill addresses the issue. There are current references in statute, primarily with regard to cost of living adjustments that refer to a consumer price index that's being phased out by the federal government. So it just updates the reference to the 1982, 1984 CPI.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Last bill, 491.
Senate Bill 491, this is another joint committee on pensions bill. This deals with the Title 37 transfers of service provisions. The first item was an outdated reference to the contribution rate for the law enforcement officers pension system. So instead of the old 4%, it just references that it's the applicable contribution rate. And then the other thing that the bill is doing, current law has a requirement that when a member transfers between systems, state to state, state to local, local to state, the individual is to get the benefit of any higher multiplier or the credit, the benefit provided in the new system, they need to be in that new system for 5 years. Otherwise, the transfer credit goes under the calculation for the system it came from. The system specified that this is not really something that's workable. They don't really have any way to implement it. They have not received any inquiries from local systems on how to implement it for people who transfer to locals. I would also note previously in the bills where positions had been moved into forward over the last few years, you all had waived that requirement. So the bill would repeal the 5-year requirement. And then there was an amendment, there was a 5-year requirement that we missed. So the amendment adds that in.
Okay, everybody understand? Can get a motion? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. That concludes our hearing. Our next meeting, Philip, is
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I will get to you on the time.
I'm not sure if it's 8:30 or 9. I'm joking. Senator Solly.
We talked about Senate Bill 700, and I agree with the senator across the way that if we could
Jane.
maybe as a committee. Sure.
1 second. Go ahead. Start over again.
Senate Bill 700, as we discussed, stated that the good senator across the way, if we could, Mr. Chairman, maybe have a letter from the committee, if it's possible, to send to our federal partners
Yes.
and sign to maybe we can get something from them. That would be
Absolutely.
great.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Great suggestion.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything else for good of the order? All right, motion to adjourn. Thank you all.